Sometimes love happens by the light of the moon. Sometimes it needs the full force of the sun. And sometimes it's the small signals we send each other that make all the difference.
Nature is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you, your local gas company, and America's natural gas industry, fueling power plants for a cleaner environment. And by Canon, quality and innovation for the way we work and live. Canon.
Sex by moonlight is nothing new. In fact, one creature's sexual response to moonlight is so ancient and predictable that in the Pacific Islands, the Samoans base their oldest traditional feast on it. They even set their calendar by it. During the waning half moon in November, millions of marine worms break in two. It's the annual rising of the Pololo worms. The main body of each worm stays where it is, firmly anchored in a crevice in the coral reef. The tail section, the sexual part, swims free. Drawn by the moonlight, the worms stream upward. At the surface, the male sections explode into sperm, and the female into eggs. The sex cells merge, filling the lagoon with millions of brand new Pololo worms. The Samoans consider the unbroken Pololo worms to be a delicacy on the order of caviar. By causing tides, the moon synchronizes the release of these millions of genes. The worms all break in two at the same time. Certainly, it's by watching the moon that people know when to expect the event, which only lasts about half an hour, just before sunrise. The rest of the day is for celebration. At twilight, across the Pacific in the waters off California, another gathering is taking place. Rising from their daytime slumber, bat rays unfurl their 4-foot wings and join in a nuptial flight. Couples pair off from the throng, and with the female on top, the male gently rubs his back against her belly. Finally, she accepts him, and they mate. For 2 weeks, the bat rays soar on these nightly moonlit flights. And then, as mysteriously as they arrived, each bat ray leaves alone. The moon can be used as a signal, a calendar, but the real power it has on the Earth is its ability to pull the oceans back and forth to make tides. These fish, Pacific grunion, also mate by the moon. They use the full moon at full power. At the height of the spring tide, grunion ride the waves onto the beach, and while on shore, they mate. The females back into the wet sand and lay the eggs. The males flop around and fertilize, spreading a sperm froth over the mixture of water, sand, and eggs. They do it quickly before the tide recedes, so they can catch the next big wave back to sea. Most sea creatures that leave their eggs or have their young on beaches are air-breathing animals like turtles or seals. The grunion is the only marine fish that can manage it. Left on land, the eggs are safe from sea predators. Almost 2 weeks pass before the tide is high enough to reach the buried eggs and stimulate them to hatch. Now the hatchlings swim for their lives. The predators that might have eaten them as eggs are waiting in the water. But at least their time in the sand has given the tiny fish a head start. And with even the sea anemones in on the hunt, it's that small advantage that guarantees the survival of some of the fish and their genes. The moon has been orbiting the Earth and pulling at the sea since before there was life in the sea. And once life evolved, it began helping these creatures ashore. It's called a horseshoe crab, but it's not a crab at all. It's a distant relative of the spider, a relic of an eon when it may have been the Earth's most advanced form of life. Like the grunion, it rides the highest tides to reach its egg-laying beach. The female digs the eggs in, and the male fertilizes them, holding on with a special arm. When the horseshoe crab first evolved, this beach on the east coast of North America didn't exist. On land, there was very little life and no predators at all. But in the sea, life and danger were abundant. On land, the horseshoe crab's eggs were safe. But over the course of millions of years, evolution populated the land and the air, and the eggs now have hordes of predators. Now, animals so modern that they have warm blood and wings feed directly on the spawn of a creature that was among the first life forms to emerge from the sea, an ancient creature following the ancient pull of the moon. But the moon is a relatively minor force because Earth is a solar-powered planet. The sun affects all aspects of life, including sex. Flowering, for instance. As the Earth circles the sun, the seasons change. When days become longer and warmer, spring has arrived. Spring comes late to the high country, but when the snow finally melts, the willows and grasses sprout new growth just in time to feed a doe and her new fawns. The longer days trigger a burst of activity everywhere, and in the marshes, red-winged blackbirds are raising their families. This pair has built a nest in the tall reeds. Its location is a security measure. Red-winged blackbird chicks are born completely helpless, and the nest is hidden to keep them safe. The female is busy providing the chicks with meat, worms, and insects that are now in fresh supply. Successfully raising a family is often a matter of timing. The new growth of spring feeds insects, and when insects are abundant, the chicks have hatched and are ready to eat them. The eggs were laid in anticipation of this, back when the only clue to the coming food supply was a slightly longer day. Swans, too, respond to the new warmth and light, and to the new availability of food, both in and out of the water. The result? Cygnets. With everything reproducing by taking advantage of everything else reproducing, spring starts a chain reaction as each new wave of life supports another. The swans laid their eggs at the right time and the right place, so that as summer progresses, the cygnets can take full advantage of the rapidly growing plants. It will then be warm enough for another creature to lay her eggs. A green turtle, she spends her life on the high seas, roaming across thousands of miles of ocean. But once every 3 years in late summer, she heads for a warm tropical beach. Under cover of darkness, she digs a nest and lays a clutch of eggs. She covers them with sand, and her maternal duties finished, she heads back out to sea. She may come ashore to lay as many as 11 clutches during the nesting season, a way of compensating for several years of not laying at all. The eggs are left to incubate in the sun-warmed sand. And the exact temperature of the sand now plays a critical role. The eggs in the warmest part of the nest will develop faster and be larger at hatching, and those become females. Females need to be larger than males because they carry the eggs. The African savanna. In the heart of the tropics, it's not the sun that's eagerly awaited, it's the rain. When the clouds break over these East African plains, the landscape changes from gray to green and promises good grazing for a few months. The herds assemble in the wake of the rains, and with a measure of safety in numbers and ample grass, it's the best time for birth. But if times are good for the animals that eat plants, they're also good for the animals that eat other animals. While the Thompson's gazelles are calving, the golden jackals are pupping. And of course, the easiest source of food for the adult jackal with its new responsibilities is a gazelle fawn. The fawn is too young to run away, and so it uses exactly the opposite tactic. It stays so absolutely still that the jackal can't see it. When the jackal finally gives up, the fawn heads straight to its mother. For the jackal, there will be many other fawns, and she'll have plenty of milk for her pups. The rainy season is short, and so growth has to be fast. After 4 weeks, the adult jackal is still eating for the cubs, but not just to produce milk. The cubs can eat meat themselves now, so instead of digesting all of her meal, their mother simply carries some of it home in her stomach. When she gets back to the den, she regurgitates it for the family. Now the pups have the energy for some serious playing, which is really lesson 1 in how to hunt. The seasonal rains fall, the grass grows, and the grazers give birth. The predators kill some of the calves and feed them to their pups. Like the first days of the temperate spring, the year's first rains start a reproductive chain, a sense of all life everywhere making copies of itself. Another place where occasional rain sets off a reproductive chain is the Arizona desert. Buried beneath the surface is a creature that may have waited years for this rain. It's a spadefoot toad. It avoids dehydration by spending most of its life buried underground in a sort of sleep. But when rain comes, life returns, and the first priority is mating. The deadline is the evaporation of the temporary pool. The whole reproductive process has to be conducted at double time. As the eggs are laid by the female, they're fertilized by the male. Inside them, the embryos develop fast. And the shrinking desert pool is soon full of tadpoles. There's an urgency to grow up before the water's gone, and in the rush, they eat each other. In fact, there seem to be two kinds of tadpoles, carnivores and herbivores, two strategies competing to win the race against the sun. In this pool, the difference is academic. They've all lost. But a few pools were big enough to last until the tadpoles turned into toads. After their quick start to life, the toads settle in for the long, dark wait until the next rains. The moon, the sun, the rain, these set the rhythms of the seasons that trigger reproduction for creatures around the globe. But there are instances when no external event seems to be involved, and although the timing is regular enough, it just seems odd. What, for instance, is the significance of 17 years? 17 years is exactly how long this nymph has been entombed in this chamber, feeding and growing underground. And now, on time, it stirs and starts to climb. All around, in other chambers, other nymphs have also heard their internal alarms and have also started to climb. There are thousands of them, all heading relentlessly up the trees. In time, each one stops, locks onto the bark, and slowly starts to split down the back. Finally, long after dark, something entirely different rises out of the nymph's skin. After 17 years, an adult American cicada. The next crucial challenge is to hang on to the tree for the time it takes its wings to dry. If it fails and falls to the ground, It has spent 17 years in a chamber just to be one day's breakfast for some forest animal. The ones that do hang on will get a chance to mate. All these years they've been preparing for this. The male calls, the female comes, and the two join. Later, the female finds a twig that meets certain specifications, inserts her ovipositor, and lays 20 to 30 eggs. Once she's done that, there's no more reason to live, and she dies. Her genes are now the responsibility of tiny larvae, and their challenges in life begin with a struggle to get out from under the bark. This extraordinary life cycle is carefully timed to prevent predators from becoming cicada specialists and to simply overwhelm them when the larvae do emerge. The larvae now dig in, not to emerge for 17 years. Internal alarms and celestial clocks give life a sense of timing and trigger the urge to start the next generation. But there are other triggers, smaller and more intimate, signals that pass between individuals specifically to attract, to impress, and to seduce. These flowers, for instance, are designed solely to lure pollinating insects, sexual go-betweens for the plants. They dazzle the senses with flamboyant colors, velvet textures, and intoxicating scents. In fact, they're so irresistible that we use them ourselves to express a special interest in someone. But no matter what signals are sent, the point of it all is to capture someone's attention. On the grasslands of East Africa, Jackson's widowbirds are sending signals. A male, a female. Generally, when there's a vast difference between the two sexes of the same species, it's because one is trying very hard to communicate something to the other and is having to compete to do it. If the female is to find the male to mate with him, it helps if he makes himself conspicuous, but there's more to it than getting her to notice him. He wants to tell her how he is, too, how strong he is, how able to carry around an extravagance of feathers. He's signaling data about his health, his fitness, his overall genetic quality. There are almost as many methods of transmitting these vital statistics as there are species. And often the names that we give to animals are based on what we see in these methods. We call this little African finch a weaver bird. The male is telling the female the same thing, essentially, that a male widow bird tells his female. but he does it by showing off his weaving skills. And in the process, he makes something useful, a home. She keeps an eye on the work in progress. The important thing to her is that the nest be as green as possible. This means the male must work fast before the reeds turn brown. This allows the female to judge his dexterity and experience. If the construction doesn't go as planned, he must start all over again. As his skills improve, he'll be able to complete a nest in about a week. A weaver bird nest is in fact one of the wonders of animal architecture. It's rainproof and windproof, and the downward-facing entrance, which closes if anything grasps it, keeps out snakes and birds of prey. It's all done to signal his suitability for her. When she finally approves, they start a partnership and a new generation. For animals who live in a deeper, darker world, visual signals don't work very well. They must rely on something else. This is the Sea of Cortez, and in its cold waters lives a creature called the sea tiger. The sea tiger is an elegant sea slug. It's also a cannibal that follows the trail of other sea slugs and engulfs them within its deadly oral veil. But what happens when two sea tigers encounter each other? The reaction is immediate and violent, but just the touch of their own kind quickly transforms a battle into passion. Mating organs protrude from the sides of each sea tiger as they maneuver for contact. In a way, it's a double mating, for each of these creatures is both male and female, and after an exchange of eggs and sperm, they both will be pregnant. Up in the dry, barren mountains of the Middle East, male ibex are risking their lives, fighting for the right to mate. The females live in groups, and during the mating season, when they all come into heat, the males fight for control of the harem. The females signal their breeding condition by giving off a chemical scent, which the male picks up by sticking out his tongue. A male moves in to check where a female's just been sitting to see if vital scent clues have been left behind. Not only can he taste the scent with his tongue, he also has a special organ on the top of his mouth that's sensitive to it. When he grins and curls his lip, he brings both senses of smell and taste into play. A male follows a female who is ready to mate, follows her scent signal, using it as a guide to time his advances. Sexual signaling is so important that signal senders try to stimulate as many senses as possible. Chimpanzees, our closest relatives. This female's swollen genitals are a sign that she's ready to mate, for the first time perhaps since her baby was born a couple of years ago. Now the baby is ready to be weaned. From now until she's pregnant again, the female will be ovulating once every 34 or 35 days, and taking care of one youngster is no longer an obstacle to getting another one underway. Just to make doubly sure that the males are aware of her change in condition, the visual signs are supplemented by chemical ones. And sight and smell are underlined by a new attempt to make friends. With highly social animals such as these, the fact that a female is looking for sex, and the fact that she's quite eager to let everyone know that, has implications that can affect the whole group. A female in estrus gets more attention than other females. In fact, as soon as the sun shines or the rain falls or the moonlight is right, as soon as the sexual alarm rings, the first thing an animal has to do is to send signals. But some signals are used to deceive. A male moth just out of its cocoon. A spider with a plan. As a caterpillar, the moth ate. Now it looks for a sex partner. The bolus spider, at the moment, is only interested in eating. What the moth finds is the spider's sticky bait, scented with essence of female moth. Instead of meeting a mate, the moth meets its doom. When one sex signals its quality to another, it often uses sound. From his stage on a downed log, a ruffed grouse drums for a mate. But for most birds, sound usually means song, and one of the most glorious is the song of the lyrebird. The density of this Australian rainforest severely limits the value of sight in signaling, and so the lyrebird's song is as penetrating as it is beautiful. When a female does find a song source, she then gets the full visual treatment. Even in the best of circumstances, vision is only a short-distance form of signaling. For sheer reach, nothing can equal sound, especially in the reverberating lower frequencies. It takes a large animal with double bass-sized vocal cords to make these noises, and many of them are too low for humans to hear. But the distances they can cover are prodigious. Elephants live and wander in family groups. These are made up of females of all ages and babies and juveniles of both sexes, and they are led by a matriarch. The only elephants that aren't included in this tight society are the adult males. They do their wanderings alone, and when they run into each other, they fight. Like breeding males of most species, they have a code, a set of rules that ritualize the fight and take most of the danger out of it. But for male elephants, there's a special urgency to the contest. If there's a receptive female in the vicinity, she'll only be receptive for a few days. And since pregnancy lasts 2 years, and it can take 3 years for a calf to be weaned, she won't be receptive again for 5 years. So a female in breeding condition is a matter of some occasion, and among the first males to take advantage of it are the eager but inexperienced young ones. Inexperience, though, is something the female soon seems to lose patience with. She wants an older bull, and her long-distance, ultra-low-frequency call may indicate that. It's received by bulls from miles around, including some that are still in the process of sorting out their rank. What bulls seem to learn as they mature is timing. Instead of instantly and ineffectually mounting the female, the bull waits for the right moment, something the female herself indicates by way of chemical signals in her urine. How to decipher those is another of life's lessons. Males, too, have a sexual season called musts, when liquid oozes from glands above their eyes, and the interest in receptive females is even more intense than usual. A bull in must is irritable and even appears to be in pain. He doesn't have to be in must to mate, but when he is, all the other bulls, all the other elephants for that matter, make way for him. As far as the others are concerned, that female, for as long as she's receptive, is his, and only another bull in must would dare challenge him. As mating systems go, it's as graceful, slow, and magnificent as elephants themselves. And it's all set in motion by a far-reaching call that's pitched too low for us to hear. But there is a call we can hear that reaches even farther. There are mammals that are bigger than elephants, and they live in a medium that carries sound much better than air. And they sing. They're male humpback whales, and when they sing to females, they can be heard 1,000 miles away. The song is so complex that half an hour can pass before it's repeated. The males slap the surface with their flippers, which may also be a signal of some sort. In every breeding season, there is one universal song, but the song is not static. Amazingly, all the singers change the song simultaneously in the same way. So they are all always singing the same song. It's a serenade that can be heard from ocean to ocean around the world. Next year, at breeding season, they'll take up the song where they left off. Ritualized singing and dancing performed by males to attract females, although unusual, isn't completely unknown to the human species. The Wodabi people of Sierra Leone. The men display and the women look them over, as choosy and hard to impress as female widowbirds. In comparing the men, the Wodabi women's problem is the classic female problem. Their lives are going to be dedicated largely to raising offspring. To be worth the effort, the offspring need to carry the best available genes. And which man can provide those? In this tribal society, the women look for signs and signals, and the men send them in the way their culture dictates. Skill and ingenuity at the art of putting on makeup in Wodabi society may be considered an indication of general skill and ingenuity. We don't know why we find certain features attractive, But if they make someone more likely to be chosen as a sexual partner, then those features will continue through the generations. And they can be enhanced through singing, dancing, and body painting. It happens in Western culture too. By common agreement, long eyelashes and red lips are attractive, and so face painting becomes part of a sort of sexual display. The fact that women display in this way means that to some extent they're competing with each other. In this all-important competition for mates, we find many ways to express ourselves. We try to stand out, to attract with our individuality. Instead of fancy feathers, we have fashion, style, a look. We want to do what everyone else is doing, but we want to look special doing it. We carefully select what we wear, often hoping to make a certain impression.
Sometimes I dress simply to attract attention. I know the effect it has. I expect to turn some heads. I suppose when it comes down to it, we're all a bit obsessed with sex.
In the matter of sex, we have many things in common with our fellow creatures. We display and compete, but we complicate sex with a search for something more: love. Love does send a baffling complexity of signals, but we humans, with our intricate brains, have a lot more to communicate than just health or strength. Exactly what would be hard to say, but we do know that for us, as for any animal trying to pass on its genes, it's the most important communication of our lives. Next time on The Nature of Sex, a haunting love song through the trees charms a faraway mate. Bull seals forget charm and use brute strength. Whatever the sex, partners must do a dance to prove themselves. And in the mating game, all's fair, but for some, it may be a life commitment. The Sex Contract, next time on The Nature of Sex.
Nature is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and biannual financial support from viewers like you, your local gas company, and America's natural gas industry, providing air conditioning that helps preserve the ozone layer. And by Canon, quality and innovation for the way we work and live. Canon.